Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
7:05, Alderman Florian.
Present.
Alderman Hayes. Alderman Bolton.
Present.
Alderman Guzman.
Present.
Alderman Martinez. Alderman Felix.
Present.
Alderman Newsom.
Present.
Alderman Turner. Alderman Donowitz. Mayor Taylor.
Present. Alderman Hayes is coming in right now.
Alderman Hayes.
Okay, so let me explain a little bit what tonight is about. This is not a city council meeting. This is what we call a committee of the whole. And so we will be talking about a specific topic, and that is the long-term revenue allocation plan for revenue coming in from the casino and cannabis. So we will do the presentation. Aldermen have already seen this presentation once. We will do like a discussion, questions and answers, and then we will do audience time related to this topic. And then we will do an adjournment after that. So again, what this is about is how are we going to designate our casino money and our cannabis money. Now, first off, what you'll see tonight is there's all kinds of numbers out in the public of what are we bringing in from cannabis and what are we bringing in from the casino. I've heard as much as $6 million for the casino all the way up to $40-some million a year. That is not true. And you'll see the actual figures tonight. You will see some of our long-term obligations. I've heard a lot of people talk about how we need to put money into social programs, and those are options, but one of the biggest concerns is we already are not meeting some of our obligations with pensions, with infrastructure, and all of that. So at this point, I'm going to let both Attorney Stu and Attorney Kelly go ahead and give most of the presentation. And then again, like I said, we will have a discussion, and then there's questions and answers. I just want to remind the audience, because I have had a very bad cough, if I disappear, it's because I'm choking to death, so bear with me. Alderman Newsom will take over for me at that time. Let's go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I'm Corporation Counsel Stuart Weiss. In the back is Corporation Counsel Kelly Gandersky. We're going to be trading off in this presentation on kind of the introductory slides. And then as we go through the various priorities and projects, we're going to be bringing up department heads to talk about the areas of their expertise and the areas of need that they've identified. As the mayor mentioned, this is, we're talking about a long-term revenue allocation plan for supplemental revenue. What we're not going to be talking about tonight too much about is how we're allocating our normal budget. Your normal budget, which Don, the finance director, comes and presents every year and talks about where the revenue is coming from property taxes. What? Oh. There we go. Revenue coming in from property taxes, from sales taxes, all of the normal revenues that we have coming in. Those are not, that's not what we're talking about tonight. That will be that's subject of a budget hearing that happens every spring, and that was passed at the end of April last year. This is about kind of what you could kind of think of as a frosting. This is about the revenue that's coming above and beyond based from two new revenue sources that have been created by statute. There's not a lot of times where new industries are created by government. A lot of people complain that industries are often destroyed by government. In this case, cannabis and casino gambling in Waukegan were created by legislation. And they are bringing in revenues, there's no doubt about that, but we're going to try and put that in perspective with the needs that kind of remain unaddressed in the community at this time. So the strategic goal of a long-term revenue allocation plan is to address how we're going to spend the incremental revenue generated by new non-traditional revenue streams, including casino revenue, cannabis taxes, and to a certain extent, video gaming taxes, although you're going to see that those are already allocated for by prior city councils. That's a decision that can be revisited, but you'll see that those are mainly going to fund pensions right now. This revenue allocation plan should balance addressing acute short-term needs against the need for long-term investments with high potential returns to the community. The revenue allocation plan must have buy-in from the City Council and incorporate feedback from all parts of the Waukegan community.
Thanks, Stu. Kelly Ganderski, again, Corporation Counsel. What's really instrumental when we look at new revenue coming in to a city, and a city especially of this size, is how do we wrap our arms around creating a process by which the plan for accepting those funds and for placing those funds is best utilized for the public. And so it's really important to create a plan and adopt a process, one that's transparent and one that kind of gives the council and staff a guideline on how to proceed with priorities. So in order to do that, we've created some bullet points here that you can see talking about how we would go about creating a plan and adopting a process for new revenue coming into the city. Well, we first have to identify and quantify what are these revenue expectations. As you're going to see as we move forward through the presentation, some of these revenues will be, really surprisingly good, and some are going to be, possibly nebulous. So we have to take a look and see what the predictions are over the next 5 years. We have to definitely identify needs and opportunities within the city and around the city. What are those needs from an infrastructure point of view, from a revenue point of view, from a staffing point of view, and from a holistic point of view? What are the community needs, and what are our values, and what do we say about how we spend the money? Organize spending priorities and timelines. We have to prioritize what is the most urgent needs first. And we'll, again, go through slides and look at where the city really has a lot of challenges. There's a lot of priorities that are competing with one another, and how do we create a prioritization and a timeline that satisfies the expectations of the public and best utilizes the funds? And importantly, we need to attain city council consensus for this plan, which means all of you fine people up here are going to have to agree on adopting a process. And maybe it's not a perfect process, but it has to be one that makes sense and one that's objective and one that you could all wrap your arms around and agree to. We need to solicit public feedback, and we need to have community meetings. We need to hear from the public where their needs are, where the public feels that funds should be spent, how they should be spent, where the most needs are. And we have to really receive that feedback, not just as a perfunctory exercise, but really reflect back to the community what they're saying our needs are. And finally, we need to adopt a plan by resolution. So whatever plan we adopt, the City Council adopts, is a plan and our framework for moving forward with these funds. So what are the revenue expectations? Stu, do you want to talk about the casino taxes and lease rent?
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. As I mentioned, the major sources of revenue are casino taxes and lease rent, and we're going to talk about how those are broken down and how they're already turning out. Talk about cannabis taxes and then video game taxes. Once again, we're here to kind of concretize and put some numbers on what's actually coming in. A lot of these reports are put on board docs at every meeting. I forget to look at them. Don puts them up, they're on the finance committee, and sometimes it's hard to lose, or if you look at 1 month, you kind of lose what the detail is. We're going to try and put a 10-year perspective on what these revenues are actually looking like. Okay, sorry for the raw amount of data that I threw up on this. This presentation is on board docs, so if you want to download it and you can actually read all the small details, but I'm going to run through the highlights. Our casino revenue comes from two sources. On the left is admissions gaming taxes. And then on the right is our ground lease rent. The deal that we have with the casino and with the state is that we locally receive two big chunks of funding. Admissions and gaming taxes. The admissions tax, we get $1 for every single person who walks into the casino. There was about 60, I can't remember if it's 62 or 67,000 people who walked in the casino last month. The city will get $1 for each one of those people. That's pretty easy. The other chunk of it is that the city gets 3.5% of adjusted gross revenue. Adjusted gross revenue is going to depend on how much each of those people actually gamble and how much they lose. And that's going to depend. If you're like me and you head for the penny slots, they're not going to get much out of me. If you're like some of kind of the higher end high rollers, which honestly is who FHR was trying to attract, you're going to get a much larger take from that one guest. We get 3.5% of the adjusted gross revenue. Other communities, like for instance in Des Plaines, the Rivers Casino, Des Plaines gets 5%. Why is it different? Because when the General Assembly wrote the law, they said we're going to take 5% of the local share and we're going to give 1.5% of that we're going to split it between Lake County, North Chicago, and I'm sorry, I can't remember if it's Park City or Beach Park. Park City. I always want to say Beach Park. It's Park City. So instead of getting the full 5%, that was the deal that was cut in Springfield. It's not something we can change. So those three entities get 1.5%. We get 3.5%. The projections are for this year, and these projections are not from Full House. This is, we hired, if you're a regular here, you remember that we hired a consultant to come in and do kind of a more conservative revenue projection with a firm called Convergence. So they looked at the market, they looked at revenue, they looked at all the growth that was going to be happening with all these other licenses being issued, and they came up with revenue projections. And they projected that we were going to get about $3.9 million in admissions and gaming taxes this year. Based on what we've seen, we think it's going to be a little bit lower. We think it's going to be around 3.6. That's attributable, one, to the casino probably opening a little bit later than it was supposed to, and also that the casino wasn't fully staffed up. They had trouble finding enough people to be dealers, and they didn't have all their tables and machines running right at the beginning. The good news is that we've seen that admissions have held steady. They have not dropped off that much since the initial kind of burst of interest, so that's a good thing for us. As you can see, the admissions and gaming taxes are projected to grow, starting from, we thought about 3.9, now 3.6, going up to closer to 5 million for the first few years. There's a jump between financial year 2026 and 2027. That represents when we hope the permanent casino is going to open up. The permanent casino, the current casino is about 70,000 square feet. It's the largest temporary casino ever built in Illinois. It's one of the largest casinos in Illinois, period. But when the permanent opens up, that's going to move from a 70,000 square foot tent to a 325,000 square foot state-of-the-art, very nice building. We expect that revenue should jump at that point. And that's hoping that in 3 financial years that will happen. That could happen in 4. The other chunk of revenue that the city gets from the casino comes from the ground lease. As you'll remember, the city owns about half of the property that the casino sits on. In fact, it owns all the property that the casino sits on. There's about another 10 acres that the casino bought. That's their north parking lot. That chunk, it's a kind of a crescent-shaped chunk that used to be part of the Lakehurst Mall, was ground leased to the to Full House. They have to pay a minimum rent every year of $3 million and or 2.5% of their adjusted gross revenue, whichever is greater. Now, we do not expect that 2.5% of their adjusted gross revenue is going to exceed $3 million, especially not while the temporary is open. So we are only budgeting that we're going to get $3 million, the minimum in rent, every year, while they are leasing the casino. Now, one of the deals that Full House put in, and this was in their original proposal back in 2019, when they had the public hearings and there was all the competition, they said we're going to do a ground lease, but we always have the option to buy the parcel outright for $30 million. The closest that any other bidder had offered, I believe, was $12 million. So $30 million was by far the best deal that was offered. Plus, we get $3 million a year until they exercise their purchase option. We wrote in their lease that they cannot exercise that purchase option until they build the permanent. Basically, until they've sunk some real foundations in and built a facility that they can't walk away from. So that $3 million, we expect them to pay that until they build the permanent, when we fully expect them to exercise their purchase option, which means the city will be, at some point in the future, getting a check for $30 million. That is nothing to sneeze at. That is a significant amount of money. There is one caveat in there that they can exercise their purchase option earlier if they want, but they still have to pay us the $3 million in addition to that for every year that the temporary is operating. That was one of those ones that in the legal world we call that giving them the sleeves off our vest. That was fine. I didn't care because the city still got as much money as it was going to get. That's mainly a tax strategy for them. So what does this come down to? This comes down to, if you look at the two charts together, on the admissions and gaming over 10 years, we're looking at about $69.5 million. And on the ground lease, we're looking at about $39 million. So that comes out to $108.5 million over 10 years. That's what we conservatively expect we can get. Now here's what it doesn't include, and it doesn't include this because we can't predict it. It doesn't include what we're going to get in property taxes. Now we own the property the casino's on. It's exempt right now. But the lease, because we're leasing it, that lease is actually taxable. So the property is exempt, but the lease on top of it is not exempt. It's kind of a weird concept, but that means that the schools will be getting money, that means the other taxing districts will be getting money, and that the city will be getting its normal chunk of property taxes for that lease. It isn't a TIF, though. Thank you very much. Yes. So basically, everything above the base will go into the TIF. Food and beverage taxes, we don't know how much it's going to get. They currently have 1.5 or 2.5 restaurants. They're going to have, I think, 4 at final build-out. Hotel taxes, they eventually do have a plan to build a 150-room hotel. That probably won't happen for another 6 to 7 years. And then any retail sales taxes. I guess if someone wants to buy, I went to the American Place and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. And then there's another possibility, which is sports wagering. And there is a possibility that the city could put a tax on sports wagering. One of the problems is that everybody here could be doing sports wagering on their phones while I'm droning on about this. So the sports books in Illinois, because sports wagering is on everybody's phone, sports book activity in Illinois casinos is not does not generate a huge amounts of revenue. Kind of gets people in the door, they watch the game, and then hopefully they hit the tables. So that was a really long-winded way of talking about the money that we expect to get from the casino. Top line number, $108.5 million over 10 years.
Before we go on, I want to address one small thing here, is that I know many of you have asked and read the paper about the Potawatomi situation, so we'll clarify that a little bit. Is right now, we had basically, it was dismissed, correct? And then they went to a higher court, and now it's being heard again. At this point, nothing's been decided. We still feel really strong in our case, but if something were to go wrong, that could affect this revenue. Not the revenue part.
That could delay the opening of the permanent.
Which is what I think many of you saw in the paper, that Mr. Lee mentioned, that it could delay that. I don't see that happening, but I want you, because many of you have reached out and asked about that article, I want to make sure we bring it up here.
Yeah, and we feel very confident that the case that Potawatomi have brought doesn't have a whole lot of legal merit. They brought it to delay the opening of the permanent. They tried to delay the opening of the temporary because it takes money away from their Milwaukee casino. There's really there's no other explanation for that. And we are co-defendants. Actually, we're not the primary defendant in this. The Illinois Gaming Board is the primary defendant, and they're saying the Illinois Gaming Board didn't follow the law. So that's, yeah.
One other thing that could affect is, some of you have already heard that Kenosha is looking at putting in a Hard Rock casino within their, not city limits, but township. That could definitely affect our revenue. So again, when we're giving you this information, we're giving it to you as best we know it at this point in time. And so I want to make, everything up front that people understand this is where these numbers are coming from as of today when we look at these numbers, without anything else, no other competition, just so you understand that.
Kelly, can you take us through the other
I sure can.
level of
So
revenue?
I know everyone's getting really excited hearing these numbers. We've got more revenue to talk about, cannabis tax revenue. Unfortunately, cannabis tax revenue has not been the moneymaker. I think that the state legislature thought it was going to be, or the municipalities thought it was going to be. Not much to say here other than over a 10-year total, we don't really expect revenue to change from a cannabis tax perspective. That's because currently, right now, there's only 2 dispensaries in the city as of Q4.
Actually, we have one, and one's under construction.
That's right. So we just don't expect an increase in these numbers. Total taxes to the city based on cannabis tax revenue is 5.25%, and the breakdown of that is on the slide, and it's in your in the presentation on board docs. I'm not going to bore you with that. But we're just not seeing substantial growth. There's a lot of theories behind why that is. Maybe it's difficult to procure licensure through the state. It's, some people just prefer not to shop for their cannabis, unfortunately. So over a 10-year period, we're looking at $6.2 million, conservatively speaking.
And again, can I just add that one of the things that could actually make that revenue less is, right now, Wisconsin does not have cannabis, not legally. That could change tomorrow. I mean, there could be a federal law that comes and says it's legal in all 50 states, and then whatever advantage you have by being the first one to be able to do it, now you lose that advantage, and everybody has that. So again, we expect this income to stay very flat. We don't see a big growth in that. You might get another cannabis center in Waukegan, but I don't think you're going to see a big change in numbers.
All right, so we have the 2 top line numbers, $108.5 million from the casino, $6.2 million over 10 years from cannabis. Video gaming tax, we've had video gaming in the city for a while now. And the city gets the city's share of the video gaming tax is about 5% of net income. In financial year 2023, that came out to be $1.6 million from 59 active locations, 342 active terminals. We don't expect a lot of, and that's not actually the full amount that they could have. We allow up to 61 locations with, I believe, 6 terminals each. Not every location actually has the full number of terminals. We do not expect this growth to actually increase. We think that this revenue is pretty flat, and we're projecting $1.5 million a year for the next 10 years. According to Don, that's about where we expect it. There's going to be some cannibalization where some folks who were doing video gaming may be going to American Place, but it is really serving kind of two different markets, for better or worse. And all of that revenue is currently split between the annual fire and police pension contributions. So that money is currently $750,000 to one, $750,000 to another. That's where it goes every year. And the other aspect that people ask about is the push tax. Push tax was implemented by the city council, I think, going on about 2.5 years ago. Right after it was implemented, all of the gaming operators, the video gaming operators, got together and hired one of the most expensive law firms in Chicago to basically prevent not only Waukegan, but also a number of south suburban communities from enforcing and collecting on that tax. They have managed to gum us up in litigation. We keep winning. We've won in Cook County, we've won in Lake County, but they keep trying to appeal this up to the Supreme Court. I can tell you the Supreme Court does not care about this, and the Illinois Supreme Court, or the Illinois General Assembly, has actually clarified their law to say that the push tax is legal. Nonetheless, these operators continue to fight this. Similar to the Potawatomi, they have decided that litigation is a business strategy rather than something where you go to deal with reasonable and fair claims. So the push tax is still a possibility, but is not something that we've been able to collect at this point. Now we're going to go over to Kelly for to talk about the long-term challenges.
Okay, so here's where I get to unfortunately let everybody down. So we're talking about collectively between casino, cannabis, and video gaming tax, or somewhere in the neighborhood of around $130 million over the next 10 years. Sounds like a lot of money, right? Sounds like an extraordinary amount of money. Now, unfortunately, myself and the staff will explain to you why it's not. We have some serious long-term challenges here in the city of Waukegan, and they're challenges that have to be addressed pretty quickly. Your first long-term challenge are personnel costs, and this includes your salaries, your benefits, and your pensions. And for any municipality, generally speaking, it consists of about 85% of a municipality's budget, and that goes for exempt employees as well as collective bargaining employees, where the city is under contract to do step increases and to pay for benefits over the course of an employee's career. You can expect salary costs to increase conservatively about $2 million per year. Pension obligations, this is a big one. Now you just heard Stu say how Waukegan is smartly and conservatively split up the video gaming tax to fund the police and fire pensions, but pension obligations consist of about 8.3% of the city's budget, and the city of Waukegan is currently in debt on the pension to the tune of $268 million. So that's what the city is looking at to catch up to in order to come into compliance under state regulations. Beginning in 2025, the city is going to need to put an additional $1.5 million a year into the pension fund. Borrowing costs, debt service, you can conservatively look at $9 million per year, and that's bonded debt that the city uses for infrastructure and other capital improvements. And finally, and critically, we have infrastructure needs. The state issued a mandate that all lead service lines and municipalities have to be replaced over the next 20 years, and we're looking at $125 million. That was, for the most part, an unfunded mandate. And we have capital maintenance, so our roads, our sewers, our pipes, our buildings, that all has to be maintained. And for one of the first times, I believe in the city of Waukegan's history, the budget last year developed a capital improvement plan so that the city now budgets for these infrastructure issues and tries to plan ahead instead of using bond debt and accruing interest on the bonds to try to pay for things that we know we're going to have to pay for each year, like potholes and sidewalks and those kinds of things. And finally, you got to take care of the city's assets, the buildings that the city already has. So this building that we're sitting in, for instance, police, fire, All buildings owned by the city of Waukegan, you're looking at regular maintenance for those buildings, but also examining whether or not these buildings have a shelf life and what new construction would cost. Looking at conservatively $75 million for public safety facilities and $131.7 million for the city's water system. So those are just the upfront, very large costs the city has looking at in a snapshot. I'd like to ask Interim Finance Director Don Schultz to come up and talk about the personnel cost increases and how that looks over the next 10 years.
I think you've all heard that we're looking at about $130 million with gaming, admissions taxes, and video gaming taxes, and cannabis.
I'm sorry,
Before we do
could you
anything,
speak in the mic?
about $55 million are sunk costs already we know we're going to have over the next 10 years. In personnel costs, currently our personnel cost is about $46.8 million a year. We can expect personnel costs to increase $2 to $3 million a year over the next 10 years. It'll be an additional cost of $24 million over the next 10 years in personnel costs. And that's with an increase of about 4.5% with a cold increase and step progression for all of our employees. Pension costs, we have pension costs for IMRF employees as non-police and fire, civil service employees. IMRF rate right now is 10.48%. If we use that same rate and don't change the rate over 10 years, it's going to increase 4.5% just as salaries will. And you can see that's going to cost an additional $72,000 to $107,000 over the next 10 years.
Thanks, Don. And some of the issues we're looking at with personnel costs as well over the last 3 years, municipalities have seen a trend. It's difficult to fill positions in municipalities. Salaries are increasing, and there's, employees have a competitive advantage. So that's also driving up costs for personnel. Not to mention collective bargaining negotiations and the increased rise of healthcare.
When you look at police and fire pension funds, this past year we paid $18 million in pension costs for police and fire. We can expect those costs to go up between $1 and $2 million a year. The firefighters' pension, we pay 69.3% of their payroll into their pension fund. Police pension is 57.9% of salary into the pension fund. Currently, between IMRF and police and fire pension is $20 million a year. We can expect that to increase from $770,000 to $1.1 million each year over the next 10 years.
And just for those that don't know what IMRF is, it's the pension that municipal employees pay into. It's the pension system.
Health insurance costs. You can see the numbers there. We're going to increase from $600,000 a year up to almost $1 million a year. We figured it's going to be the same Blue Cross Blue Shield plan to provide insurance coverage for active employees, dependents, and our retirees. We assume an average annual increase of 6.5% for healthcare costs. Currently, we budget $9 million a year for health insurance costs. With an increase of 6.5% a year, that's where you're going to get the increase of $600,000 to $900,000 over 10 years.
So that's personnel. Don, can you break down for us the general obligation debt and how that works, what that is, how it works?
Yeah, we currently have $82.6 million in outstanding GO debt. General obligation debt is the debt that we pledge the full faith and credit of the city. It goes on the property tax bill. We pay for that debt with an assortment of sources, property taxes being one, home rule sales taxes being another, and some TIF notes from the McGaw Park TIF pays a portion. You can see the annual debt service is going to be between $8 and $9 million a year until the year 2034, when it goes down to about $7 million, then it goes down to about $5 and $4 million.
But this is just if the city borrows no more money against the debt, correct?
Pardon?
This is just today's numbers, not borrowing any more against the general
That's
obligation.
correct.
Right, so this doesn't account for other major infrastructure needs, emergencies that would take place in the city that the city hasn't pre-budgeted for. This is if the city does nothing but pay on this debt.
This is all debt that was issued by the city 2018 and earlier.
You say it was what? Say that again, please. I didn't hear that.
Debt that was issued by the city 2018 and earlier years. It doesn't take into consideration any future debt. We had a 2020 debt as well, but that was for McGaw Park, and it's paid directly by the TIF district in McGaw Park. And the 2021 water and sewer revenue bonds. And you can see the revenue bonds paid solely from water and sewer revenues, $3 million down to $1 million by the year 2041. But you see that outstanding debt is $30 million. 5-year projections, we take a very prudent, very conservative, very responsible estimate of revenues. We don't want to overestimate revenue projections. So we try to be conservative. We try to protect our unassigned fund balances. We have a fund balance policy for our major funds, which we adhere to for the general fund at 25% plus 8% for the stability fund, and another 15% for the water and sewer fund. But you see over a 5-year period, in the year we just finished, we had a very healthy fiscal year 23. It ended in April of 23. We were able to transfer $10 million from the general fund into the fixed asset replacement fund to cover some replacement of vehicles and equipment over the next couple of years, and still had a balance of $6.9 million at the end of 23.
So Don, even if it's true that the city has all these extra revenues coming in, you're still predicting that by 4-year 2026, the city's going into a deficit?
We will be looking at a deficit 3 years from now. We passed a structurally balanced budget for fiscal year 24. There was a $17,000 surplus in the general fund, basically revenues equal to expenditures. Fiscal year 25, we made a projection where we'll have a $1.3 million surplus in the general fund. And by the year fiscal year 26, it's $440,000 deficit, $500,000. That'll grow to $2.4 million in fiscal year 27 to $5.8 million by fiscal year 28.
So I think what this picture is painting is even with the new revenue coming in, if the city continues to still operate with its current expenses, doing nothing, this is not hiring any other additional staff, this is not making any other expenditures, the city is looking at a major deficit coming in the year 26 and 27. So this is why it's critical for the city to find alternative means of revenue and critical to find a way to pay down debt.
Don, can I just clarify something that, when we talked about the pensions, that there is now a mandate on the pensions being funded better that was put down by the state of Illinois that we need to do, correct?
We need to be 90% funded by the year 2040.
We are
right now,
nowhere
we are
near-
under 50% funded.
Yep. So that is one of the reasons that pensions and using some of the money to fill pensions would help enormously because we're far behind. The other thing is that, the state has always allowed you to do minimum payments, which is what we've done for years. And at some point, like I said, we will never meet that 2040 obligation if we do not start funding more so now. These, like I said, are mandates put on municipalities. It's not just Waukegan that is struggling with that, but it is something that all municipalities are having that put on them to fund by 2040.
And what also is computed in our projections are workers' comp and liability. right now is $8 million a year. We expect that to increase by 8% a year, each year over the next 10 years, costing on average $640,000 a year, $6.5 million over a 10-year period.
Oh, Don, we got a slide for that.
Pardon?
We got a slide for that. It's
Yeah.
coming up.
Oh, is it coming up?
Yeah, we were doing this. What we kind of wanted to do is show some really kind of the top line drivers of costs. Now we're going to talk about the needs and opportunities, and so Don, we'll probably call you back up when we get to those slides. But so the guiding principles, once again, about $130 million in revenue above the revenues that we take in from sales tax, property tax, and other normal revenues. There still needs to be a plan because I don't think that anyone up here would be satisfied if you just said, well, just pay off the pension debt. That's not what that's not the only thing that we can do. There has to be some balancing here. And so the guiding principles, when staff looked at this and is looking to the city council to provide guidance, we ask you to keep these in mind. To prioritize return on investment. Will the spending generate revenue? Can it create economic opportunity? Will it expand the tax base? Will it create either more more residents or more businesses? Or will it lower costs for the city and its residents on a long-term basis, not on a short-term basis, not just 1 year, but on a long-term basis? We emphasize that we ask the city council to think about minimizing one-time expenditures with short-term benefits. And then finally, there's a lot of needs in this community, and we ask you to focus on the city's core competencies and responsibilities. What is the city best at doing? What is the city required by law to do? And is there someone else that does it better that maybe the city can help? So we divided up the places where this money could go into 4 buckets. We've titled them Investing in the Future. Second bucket is Meeting Long-Term Challenges. Third bucket is Repairing Neglected Infrastructure. And then the fourth bucket, Community Triage and Treatment, because there are acute needs that are happening right here, right now, which need to be addressed. And so we're going to go through each of these, and we're going to bring up staff to identify the projects that they've seen in that kind of fall into these categories. This is not a closed list. This is obviously, as the city council is the final decision maker on legislation, and legislation includes a budget every year, the decisions where to put this is going to eventually lie with you. Staff is bringing their expertise and their knowledge, but once again, these are not closed lists.
Right, thanks, Stu. So when we're looking at investing in the future, we want to look at a few things. You want to look at what are the goals for development and redevelopment in the area? How does the city expand its tax base and make Waukegan a place where people want to eat, play, have fun, and spend money?
We're discussing here. Please, quiet. I'm sorry.
It's okay, I'll wait. So it's important to look at expanding the tax base for that purpose because the city wants to be able to contribute more to the needs, the urgent needs that the residents have here. More philanthropic needs are always needed in a municipality, but how do you do that if you don't have revenue coming in? So if you don't have revenue coming in, you don't have people wanting to live here, work here, eat here, play here, you don't have people spending money, you don't have income coming in, and then you're looking at real dire straits real soon. So it's critical to expand economic development. We want to attract new businesses, want to attract visitors, and you want to generate the revenue. I'm going to ask Director Noel to come up and talk about some of the projects that the city's already looked at and has conducted studies for. I'm going to ask everybody in the audience to just be quiet. There's a big echo here. There's going to be time for public comment later, and it's very disruptive to the presentation. Thank you, Noel.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So as Stu and Kelly have mentioned, one of the ways to reduce costs for residents and property owners is by growing the community. Annexation opportunities to grow Waukegan are limited because we're nearly landlocked in several locations. We can expand the tax base by redeveloping former industrial properties on the lakefront as well as underutilized properties in the downtown area. On the South Lakefront, we estimate $20 to $30 million of pre-development and development needs that would include acquisition, environmental remediation, infrastructure modifications, and other things that would be necessary to prepare the land for development and take away the uncertainty that developers currently have there.
I think we got a slide ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. There you go.
No?
Nope, I'm
was right.
following her.
Yep. Thank you. So in the central lakefront, the harbor front and North Harbor are what the areas are called in our award-winning master plan, as well as the downtown. This central area of our lakefront is estimated at about $500 million in costs. That also includes environmental remediation, property acquisition, transportation improvements, connections between the downtown and the lakefront, reconfiguration of massive infrastructure, and new commercial and residential redevelopment there.
Now, Noelle, I think it's important to highlight too, the city has already, over the course of years, spent money on these studies and looking at these projects. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've been looking at it for a very long time and working on it. We've had private property owners work on various aspects of environmental remediation and preparing individual properties. We've worked directly with the United States EPA and the Illinois EPA on remediation. There's a remediation ongoing currently. There's some remediation that's been completed. Properties are in varying stages of preparation for redevelopment. And
just what could it mean for the city to revitalize the lakefront according to the plan? What could that mean for the city of Waukegan?
It really could change the economic trajectory of the city. That's our opportunity for growth, the downtown and lakefront. So that really would expand the tax base, take the burden off the existing taxpayers. It would bring thousands of new taxpayers, among which the costs would be spread. So it would reduce everybody's burden by growing that opportunity. And there are a couple other key areas. Also downtown, the Sheridan and Washington Super Block, our nickname for it. This is a block where the city has owned most of the block for a long time, and we're currently under contract for the remaining portion. There are environmental remediation needs on this block as well. There are some pre-development costs that would be necessary. And we anticipate that because there's not an established development market in downtown Waukegan, that incentives will definitely be necessary for a developer to take on this block and develop it to our goals, to the standard that we're looking for with mixed use, residential, commercial, parking built into the block, hopefully some entertainment, restaurant kinds of uses there as well.
So even though these projects are projected to cost several $1 million, the idea is the city would not only recoup back that money over time once these projects have come to fruition, but more than that, really see a great increase in economic revenue coming in for the city. And like you said, alleviating the taxpayers' burden and creating new opportunities for the city as well.
Absolutely.
We have the Washington Street corridor. I think Engineer Jesus Alcacera wants to speak to this one.
Good afternoon, council members. So Jesus Alcacera, city engineer. The Washington Street corridor, you may know, it's a plan that has been in development for quite a few years now, since 2017, 2018. Can't remember the exact number. However, it is a $45 million project. When it first came to the engineering department, it was scheduled to be about 20 to 25 million. We've seen increase in inflation of labor costs, materials, and everything else. In addition, those plans didn't really hone into the materials that are underneath the surface, or what we call the subsurface. Everything that we scheduled here before I came to the department was surface transportation needs, and that's all laid out in the project plan. However, we must be aware that there are a lot of items under the street that we have to evaluate, ensure that our system is operating the way it has to. That includes our sewer lines, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, our water lines, and obviously our lead service lines. So this project is one of the projects that we have priority this year. However, do note that if we are going to seek funding in the future, whether it's federal or state money, we must have our NEPA requirements. And those NEPA documents come into play right at the beginning of any project. So we must spend the money now or in the near future to be able to have shovel-ready projects. Otherwise, we will lose on a lot of the funding that's coming out of the federal government. So it's very important for the city and ourselves to spend the money now for a good return on investment. Some of the key items about this corridor: it'll increase the business coming to Waukegan, it'll increase the pedestrian traffic, the street life, and also increase the quality of life for all of our residents.
Because you're looking also at ADA accommodations and sustainability options such as bicycle lanes and public transportation too.
That is correct.
Can I also add in here that, you know, lead service is mandatory by the state. And some cities like Rockford started in 2016 and were able to get quite a bit of grant money. We, on the other hand, never started until I came into office in 2021. We did our first assessment. So we were a little behind the 8 ball. And consequently, starting next year, there isn't as many grants available as there are loans. So at one time there were some forgivable loans. Starting next year, it's what they call 49% forgivable will be, they will give you, I think it's a 1.6% interest rate on $2 million. And so that's going to add to our cost, because while we are still actively looking for grants, there's not as many grants available as there were years ago when there was more money. So again, it is still a purpose for us to do. We're still actively pursuing it. But because we were not shovel ready, other municipalities that had more money than we do actually were able to receive some of the grants that we were not able to get.
That is correct, Mayor. Our next set of projects include some stormwater improvements, the Yeoman Creek and Montesano Avenue. Both of these projects are combined $7 million. The reason why these projects made the list because these were in a state where we either had a preliminary engineering done or towards the phase of the end of engineering, meaning now we're able to produce engineering documents. We have these 2 projects in the table with DCEO as part of the Stormwater Management Commission. So it is important to keep advancing these projects. If any engineering project lags behind, then we lose the fact of being, and I'm gonna keep throwing this out, shovel ready. We must show the government, the state and the federal government, that we are shovel ready with these projects, that we know how to ensure that they end, meaning everything's being done according to your procurement processes in the federal government or the state government, in addition to our own purchasing policies. There is reporting that takes along with all these grants, so that's staff time that needs to be allocated for all these projects. It's not just the construction itself, but also making sure that reporting happens, that our engineers are doing what they have to do. We're implementing quality processes in our office now that we haven't had before. So all these projects, like this one, will help to increase the quality of life. We have a lot of calls. When I spoke to Chris about these projects, there were damages done to these properties along Montesano Avenue and Yeoman Creek. So ensuring that our flooding requirements are met means increasing the quality of life and reducing the damages from the stormwater into the businesses and homes.
Before the city engineer proceeds on this next slide, you know, we have a whole other bucket that's called addressing our infrastructure. This is in investing in the future for a reason, though. because investing money in the water system has the potential to allow, not the potential, it would allow Waukegan to actually begin selling water to other communities on a much larger scale. Waukegan, for all of its challenges, has an amazing advantage in that it's sitting on its border is one of the largest freshwater sources in the world. And the ability to sell water creates a revenue stream that can be captured. But unfortunately, the system in its current condition needs significant repairs and upgrades to serve not only Waukegan's population, but any further wholesale customers that it could actually serve in the future.
Thank you, Stu. Just to clarify one more item too, I mean, there has been investment done at the water plant, so we are better now than we were a few years ago. However, it's not just the water plant itself, there's the distribution system. In order to understand how the system behaves, you really have to look at the modeling. Our surface water comes from Lake Michigan, gets filtrated by Antonio's group and distributed out to our pumping stations along the city, and that subsequently our distribution lines run all over the city. So you can imagine, if I'm not mistaken, we have around 280 miles of water main that we need to maintain and operate. So that means where do we have the most calls for water main breaks? Where's our room for improvement for water main extensions? Where do we have to replace water lines that they're not breaking, but they don't have sufficient capacity to provide the adequate pressure at certain parts of the city? In addition, if we don't have enough pressure from the water lines, then that means we need to evaluate adding additional pumping stations, whether it's towards the lake, which is not the case because most of the pumping stations are near Macquarie Road, except for the one in the 9th Ward. However, once we get to the north side of Waukegan, we need to start thinking in the future, where do we have the capacity to add on more pumping stations? The goal here is to also increase revenue, so that means extending our water lines as far as we can. So some of these projects that we laid out include $131.7 million for that include water main extensions, replacements, the capital improvement plans at the plant and at the pumping stations. So it's investing in the public health, and it creates our long stream revenue in the city.
I didn't know if you wanted to talk about the individual slides or if we can move.
If council has a question about this slide, I can certainly answer questions. But it's allocating about $2 million every year for our water main extension. And we also have our projects at the water plant that are ranked from 1 to 30. These are set for actually 46. So these projects are laid out in conjunction with Antonio. We had the engineers come out and evaluate the system, what upgrades we have to do now before we start going into what we'll call the safety hazard mode. So a lot of those projects, if we can start those now with the revenue that is coming in from these various sources, will definitely ensure a reliable system at the water plant, and it'll alleviate Antonio's crews from having to go and spend extra labor hours trying to fix problems.
I have a question. How long are we looking at in terms of in the year? How long do we project to have the water plant ready for when we're actually making more revenue?
So the water plant, like I mentioned earlier, we are at a state where it's better now than it was a couple of years, but I can let Antonio talk about that.
Good evening. My name is Antonio Dominguez, the water plant director. So your question is, how long will it take to?
Yeah, like what's the projected time with what we're going to be putting in year after year to get to the point where we're actually having more revenue coming in from different cities by selling the water?
So we would have to start a 5-year capital improvement project to begin where we can start. First, we have to start capital improvement projects at the water plant, and then we move outside to build a new storage tank over by the beach park area. That way we can try to sell more water out west. But yeah, it's gonna take quite a while. I would say 5 years.
And with the investment that we would, Is that in this plan where we're looking at to start fixing the water plant itself
Yes.
now to begin the capital improvement project?
Yes, it's the water treatment plant and then outside. The water mains, that's what Jesus was talking about. A 5-year capital improvement project for water mains also.
Okay. Thank you.
Noel, I'm not sure who would speak about the lakefront projects, if that would be Jesus or you.
I will have to hand it off to our Director of Planning and Zoning for this one.
So several of the projects for the lakefront include the dunes, boardwalks, and pathways.
Sorry, can you speak a little bit more in the mic?
Sure.
Thank you.
Is this better? Okay. Several of the projects for the lakefront include the dunes, boardwalk, and pathways, which you may recall our lakefront coordinator already received a grant to start planning those. So the construction of those would be a forthcoming project. We'd also like to build a new beach house. Those of you who have been in Waukegan a while remember that we used to have one. It would be a benefit to our residents and beachgoers to have a modern beach house there. We also think that there's a need for an auxiliary bathroom, meaning a freestanding bathroom at the other end of the beach from where the beach house is, so that there's something in relative proximity no matter where you are on the beach. Maintenance will be an important cost that needs to be factored in to the development costs for a beach house. And then the improvements that are required for Seahorse Drive, which includes a realignment of the road. It includes the development of bioswales and pedestrian access alongside the road to make it safe for people to walk and bike to and from the beach with the other traffic that's there.
Thanks, Noel.
I got a question on that one. Okay, so what happened to the money that was approved with the animal shelter thing that we're building over there that was supposed to also include a lake house?
There is money in the budget currently for the beach house. We've had some recent conversations around, and Chief of Staff, I don't know if you want to speak to it or if you want me to just keep going. We've had some recent conversations about the plan for developing that beach house and what makes sense.
The team has come together on that animal control building. We've met. We want to do more in-depth evaluation of a full project. The team states that we don't want to half-step on it. We want something that is going to meet the demands of the community. To answer your question, there is $1.2 million in the fund, and that we're going to utilize to do the environmental, architectural, to really do the planning to do the lake house properly. And we're also going to use this time to put in for a grant. There is another grant that we can secure some more funding that, I don't remember if it had an exact match. I forgot the match was very, very minimal, if there was a match, for almost up to $4 million. So we are going to take this time to thoroughly plan with the team and to attempt to apply for that grant.
So the money was for planning a beach house, or it was for the beach house?
No, we were securing it for the beach house. We're now only going to use some of those funds for the environmental, architectural, just to do a proper planning. We're not going to use all of $1.2 million for that.
So
but we are going to use that.
So where's that money, rest of it is it going to come back, or where's it going to go?
If it's not funded, if it's not spent on anything, it'll remain in that fund.
How much is it just to architect this?
We haven't gotten
We
that
haven't
far
gotten
yet.
that far yet. We were going, so initially we talked about maybe doing like individual, instead of doing stalls, like you go into a room and there's stalls, we thought it might be best if they were like little rooms that you went into so that you weren't sharing space, if that makes sense. When we started talking it through, when we talked directly to the Lakefront coordinator about it, we decided that we probably needed more bathrooms than what we were anticipating, and that would require an architect to kind of design that. do the drainage of it, all of that. How are we gonna keep this clean? The other thing we need to look at is what is the staff that's gonna be needed to maintain that? That wouldn't be something that your beach rangers would do. You would need a sanitation people to do that. And you still are probably gonna need a certain amount of porta potties because there's a lot of people that come to that beach on the weekends and especially holidays. So we kind of revamped it and thought, initially we were trying to spend it this year and get it going. And then when we really thought about it, we thought, we think we can do the architectural part of it, but let's go for a bigger grant than what we were thinking that we were going to need.
And the team came together also, and we're even considering moving it, relocating it to a different area instead of trying to be confined to the area that we were initially going to place it, because our only real reasoning was that, hey, the old beach house was there, let's put it back. The team actually said it's a good idea for us to think that, hey, we may want to move it so it's more conducive to our community.
So $1.2 million was, I just want everybody to know, the previous council voted on getting them a beach house connected with the animal shelter.
No, in conjunction.
In conjunction, sorry. So how much was allocated for the beach house? $1.2 million?
Total was 1.5.
1.5 for the beach house?
And then the rest is to finish the animal control, which is in the fund.
So how much is the architectural for?
We haven't gotten that far
100,
yet.
200,000?
We have no idea. We haven't gone out for an RPF on that.
So the money doesn't use, the million comes back, correct?
It will be unspent. It will not be expended on anything unless decided by the mayor.
So it could move on to the final project to the animal shelter where?
I think we have enough funding for that.
Oh, okay. Because I thought a couple meetings ago said some stuff was still left on that.
That is correct. That's why I said it's 1.5 in that line item, that GL. We're guessing 1.2 for the beach house. The other 3 will be to finish all of the amenities in the animal control.
Okay, thank you.
So the second bucket is long-term challenges. And you're going to say, hey, I thought we talked about our long-term challenges. Yeah, we're going to talk about it twice. So the long-term challenges, we've talked about a number of these, but the key things are that these are things that are kind of imposed on us either by the state, by history, or by choices that prior city councils made. And whether you think they're good choices or bad choices or the best choices they could make with the information that they had at the time, there's still things that we have to deal with now. And so we've talked about the pension funding, talked about salaries, talked about lead service lines, and we've talked about, actually, we have not yet talked about insurance premiums. So Bob, could you come up and talk about this expense, which is one that we don't think about. You probably think about the city's insurance about as much as you think about your own life insurance, which most of us try and avoid thinking about. So Bob, can you take us through this slide?
Yes. The first slide we're looking at is the annual increase in our liability pension fund, our liability insurance. Typically, our insurers are telling us to anticipate a 20 to 30% increase annually in our liability insurance. If you go look up there, 2 years ago it was about 1.7 million. Last year about 1.9. This year we only have a 10-month contract because we're changing our insurance renewal date. It used to be July, now it's May. So it was only 1.98 this year, but in reality, if we would have worked it out over a 12-month period, it would have been about $2.3 million, our liability insurance. Our insurance carriers are telling us to anticipate next year that to look at about $3 million in our liability insurance, and that's just our premiums. With that, one of the reasons we kept it lower this year was the 10-month, but also that our SIR, which our SIR is the amount of money that we pay out before our insurance policies take effect. Last year, we ranged between $250,000 and $500,000. This year, all of our levels of SIR went to $1 million.
So that's your, for those of us who aren't in the insurance business, this is your deductible. This is what, whenever a claim is made against the city's insurance, what the city is going to have to pay out of pocket before insurance starts contributing. And just like with healthcare, when you go in, you say, I've got healthcare, and they say, yeah, that'll still be $500 because you haven't met your deductible. That is the upfront cost that we have to be conscious of. And then, Bobby, if you could talk a little bit about a separate insurance policy, which is our law enforcement liability.
This year was the first year that we had 3 insurance carriers that we've used for years that would not carry our law enforcement liability insurance. So in 3 different lines of our insurance coverage, we have a separate company that's just covering law enforcement liability for us, aside from our property and all of our other levels of liability. They're anticipating that future change from that $1 million that we got this year, that next year they said in our law enforcement line we should be expecting a $2 million deductible, or SIR, with a possibility of that going up to $3 million.
And this isn't just hitting Waukegan. A lot of these companies are getting out of this market. It is very difficult to insure against law enforcement claims. We could have a political discussion about why that is, and what those costs, whether they're valid or they should be higher or lower. But there are fewer and fewer companies that are willing to insure in this market.
Yeah, just on our base level, there's only 2 companies. Our brokers went out. There was 2 companies that put in a bid. There's been 2 companies for the last 5 years that in Illinois that put in bid for municipal liability insurance, especially the law enforcement side. With that, it's harder and harder every year to get law enforcement liability coverage over the $5 million rate. We carry very high lines of insurance, and to get that above the $5 million policies, it's taken more and more insurance carriers to take a smaller chunk of that money above that. And in reality, our brokers are telling us, because when you see claims anywhere in the country, our insurance carrier covers about 90% of municipality law enforcement, so they're paying those claims everywhere. And they're just getting out of the market. And what they're telling us, in a few years we should anticipate over $5 million of the city having to cover the cost of that liability above that range. And when you see the lawsuits out there in the $20, $30 million settlement range, that is why these insurance carriers are getting out of there, getting out of that coverage.
And Bob, when you say self-fund law enforcement liability, what does that mean in a practical matter?
In a practical matter, it means that we should have a bank of money set aside for police liability claims over $5 million. Whether we take it from the 5 to cover $20 million in a bank, that just sits there for those future law enforcement liability claims is a reality that we will be facing in a few years. And it's a reality that most municipalities are going to be facing because the insurance carriers cover most municipalities.
Bob, we're going to keep you in the hot seat and talk about, have you talk about workers' compensation?
Yes. Currently, our workers' compensation costs, our SIR for workers' compensation, our deductible on a workers' comp claim is $750,000. It's been at that $750,000 range for about 7 years. It's a pretty standard range for municipalities for workers' comp.
And I'll just mention on workers' comp cases, this is not something that the city necessarily wins. Typically, there's usually 99% of the time there is a payout. It's usually how much. And so I think what's important to understand here is if the deductible is $750,000 per claim, you can pretty much imagine that almost every claim that comes in is coming out of taxpayer money.
Yeah. In the last 30 years, we've only hit our SIR on a workers' comp claim 1 time. So all the other claims have come out of the taxpayers' money for workers' comp. If you look up there, the policy years, what we cost, that is what workers' comp has cost the city before we hit that 750, which we don't hit. So in 2019 to 2020, it was $1.7 million we paid for claims, which are claims, the medical, all the other expenses that go with a workers' comp claim when it's put in. 20 to 21, it was $2 million we hit. 21 to 22, it was $1.4 million. Last year we had a good year. we paid $866,000 only in workers' comp claims. It's my department's job, and we're working to lower those claims. We're doing more training, more investment in our staff to try to get those claims down every year. The two high years were COVID claims. We had a lot of COVID claims in 20 and 2021, so that brought our numbers up, but we're getting them down again. And then the workers' comp expense, if you go back, that's just what we pay the insurance carrier for our workers' comp. And it's that claim amount, the premium, is tied directly to our salaries. As our salaries go up, that premium goes up. So it's a direct tie to salaries, workers' comp premiums.
And that's because when someone claims work comp, they're not only getting paid for their injury, they're getting paid for a portion of their salary for time out of work.
Yes. Any questions?
I do.
Yes, sir.
So we're paying $181,000. Multiply that by 7 years. You're talking about almost, what, $1 million, and we've only used it one time. So why are we not self-insured?
It's stopgap coverage for in case we get that claim over that $750,000. It doesn't happen very often, but if not, we got to pay higher fees, and we got to have more money set aside by the state. If we're truly self-insured, the state requires us to put money aside, millions of dollars, to make sure we're able to fund those costs, where we don't have to do that if we have stopgap workers' comp insurance.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to go back to, thanks, Bob.
No problem.
We're going to go back to some of the other long-term challenges that we have. There's a picture of a nice torn-up road here. And what we have to just talk about is another mandate, which is the ADA plan, Americans with Disabilities Act, and what that means when the city touches its infrastructure and seeks to improve that. So Jesus, why don't you talk about the ADA plan, why it's important, and how the city needs to manage that.
Okay, so the number that you see, the 30 million, that's a very rough estimate. That's just accounting for your sidewalks and your ramps, trip hazards. Does not include any adjacent road work that may have to occur. As you can see from the photos they're taken in the 5th Ward, these roads will most likely require a full reconstruction in order to provide an up-to-date ADA standards. Also, as we in the industry, we call it PROWAG. It's the Public Right-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines.
Please.
The PROWAG itself, it's going to become a mandate for us in the next couple years. IDOT has provided a draft to the state of Illinois that's going to be up for legislation very soon. Once that's adopted, we will have to comply with the PROWAG requirements in the state of Illinois. Right now, it is the ADA requires any private development to comply by these standards, not necessarily municipalities. However, over the past years, we have been doing a very good job as an internal policy of providing the sidewalks that are required in the city with every road program. This will become a mandate at some point. So when I say we, Director Garland and myself are proud that every single time we have a road, we are looking at the ADA compliance or PROWAG. But yeah, so this $30 million just accounts for the sidewalk reconstruction. If there's any adjacent road work, it obviously will increase your cost.
I have a question. So, like you said, this picture is in the 5th Ward, Greenwood. So in order to resurface, before you can resurface this road, we have to take into account, first of all, I guess, lead.
In this particular area, our preliminary survey results did not have lead.
Okay.
So
good.
It all depends, though. We are basing off of building data, the county building, when the building was constructed. We are starting to have a more refined analysis done to the modeling to ensure that we have more adequate data. But as many of you know, not everybody can see underground. And it's difficult for us to quantify. But our preliminary surveys, they are giving us good data. So this one in particular is not in the lead service line plan because we believe it does not have lead.
Okay, so in order to resurface, you have to go in and put in
We have-
sidewalks,
Mhm.
gutters, curbs,
Yes, ma'am.
everything,
Yes.
ADA accessible.
Yes, so that, or the whole reconstruction, it does kick up the prices quite a bit. I don't have exact numbers, because we still see the CPI, the inflation numbers keep growing, not as much as we saw last year, but they're consistently rising.
So we're not gonna try to push those back a little bit because they don't have curbs and gutters? Are we gonna look at trying to get those into compliance prior to looking at a street perhaps that already has sidewalks and curbs and?
Well, to answer your question, yes, we have to bring everything up to code.
Okay.
Up to date. It's not a code per se.
Okay.
However, we are constantly now we are evaluating where we can do most work right now without having to go and replace the lead service lines. So these particular locations are a challenge because they don't have sidewalks. So when we do budget, we are developing our 5-year capital plan that will give us a more concise number of what we're looking at when we present
So
to
yeah,
City Council.
not to interrupt you, Jesus, I think one of the important things to look at too, and it's from a strategic standpoint, so if the state is mandating you replace lead service lines, what Jesus and his team does is look to see where those lines are, how they're gonna be replaced, because you don't wanna tear up the streets twice.
Right.
So that's why when he's, looking to tear up the streets to do the lead pipe replacement, he's also looking at the area around it, how do we, if there's lines to bury, if there's utilities to bury, if there's roads to resurface, if there's other ADA components, how do we get that done all at once so that we're not redoing the roads twice?
Absolutely.
And there's a question and answer session later, please. No audience interruption at this point.
She interrupted him, she need to let him, we want to hear from the director.
Please, either you can leave or you can sit, whatever you want to do. Excuse me, I'm running the meeting, okay? Again, you have those two options.
I understand, Jesus. And the reason why I'm asking is because I'm asked constantly, when are they gonna get to this street? So that's why I'm asking.
And if you drive in the city towards west of Macquarie, you see a lot of these roads this way. It's because these were annexed in the older part of town. There were the townships. So again, right, we would go back to the guidelines. Right now, we're not mandated to do the sidewalks, but we will. And our policy states that we must. This is our internal policy between Public Works and Engineering that we want to make the city walkable. We have an increased population, that's the older generation. We have a population that's not diverse, so having these sidewalks in place is important.
Right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I have a quick follow-up question. Just, are sidewalks required on both sides of the street or just one side of the street?
Both sides.
Both sides of the street.
Unless there's an accessible pathway adjacent. For example, Western Avenue along the Robert McClory bike path, we only require it on one side because there's an accessibility point on the west side of the street.
Okay. And do you foresee any issues with taking what homeowners have previously been maintaining up to the street and in constructing a sidewalk there? If they've landscaped the area, does the city have responsibility to pay the homeowner for the landscaping that they've done, or to remediate the land that the city is now putting a sidewalk on? I mean, are we expecting something extreme as litigation, or is it just notice to the homeowner that you're planning to install a sidewalk? And
that's a very good question, Alderman. That's a conversation that has to occur with the mayor's office, because anything in the right-of-way, it's technically city's property.
Okay.
So we don't have to pay them. However, there could be ways to mitigate those, such as increasing the landscape adjacent, having conversations with the homeowners, letting them know that they are on the right-of-way.
Sure.
So those conversations can happen, it will happen at a later date.
Okay. And the driveways would be another example. You're going to have to cut potentially through somebody's driveway.
Correct.
To put a sidewalk in. Okay.
Correct. Yep.
So those are all conversations that will start with the mayor's office. And given issues that have happened recently, I think it's just a function of making sure that everybody has adequate notice of projects coming up.
That is correct. Our previous training last week from IDOT, considering EJ communities, where EJ communities, they emphasize communication with all of our residents for most of our capital work, so yes.
Okay, last question on this point. The right-of-way, can you give us some direction on where the right-of-way is as it relates to, for example, this property, this street, Greenwood, did you say it was?
So if you see, well, let's take they're both on the right side. So if you take a look at the photos on the right, you see the sidewalk. The outermost edge of the sidewalk, that is where city property starts, and it'll be a mirror image on the other side.
Okay, is it a certain distance from the center of the road?
It's not, so it all varies.
Okay.
It all varies throughout the city. Sometimes the the right-of-way could go from as low as 30 feet up to 60. And as you see at our major roads, our collectors and arterials, those are even wider to provide adequate access into the city.
Okay, so it depends.
It all depends.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Yep.
And the other thing that we didn't discuss here is that can affect drainage for many of the communities, especially in the 8th and 9th wards, because they have larger lots, and they've never had sidewalks because of the lot size. So now there's landscaping there. Drainage would have to be reassessed, and how you would do those sidewalks is going to be difficult at best. So again, doing roads in areas that have these issues, we kind of have to come up with how we're going to do that before we jump in and do them.
I just have a question. In my subdivision, we only have sidewalks on one side of the road, and it's a newer subdivision. How'd that happen? When you just said you have to have it on both sides?
That I don't have an answer for you, Alderman.
Okay, well, maybe you can look into that and let me know, because this is the first time I've heard that well, they were supposed to be on both sides, and
yep.
Our whole subdivision is one side.
Typically, when a development gets approved, the drawings come in, so or whoever approved it at that time made that decision to let it go.
Okay. Thanks, Jesus.
I got one more question. Okay, so the right-of-way, because I have a couple places where it's going to need sidewalks, but it's right by the forest preserve. So the right-of-ways are right-of-way no matter what, correct?
Yeah, if it's on our right-of-way,
That's
we have to put it there, yes.
And we get a right-of-way, what, 5, 10, whatever feet it is?
It all depends, right? We have seen instances where the road, it's abutting the right-of-way, for example, in East Bonnybrook Lane, that it's one of the challenges. It's a very tight right-of-way. So our engineers are evaluating how do we approach the lead removal, the drainage with the sidewalks, and doing the road reconstruction.
Thank you.
All right, other long-term challenges is IT infrastructure improvement costs. Stu, do you want to take us through that?
Yeah, actually, we're going to let Ron come and scare the heck out of us about IT vulnerabilities. So this is one of those things that, we think about infrastructure as being, as being roads, pipes, and, very heavy physical things. The fact is that most of the work that government does these days is actually information. And when information is a resource that can be compromised, Ron is passing out articles about major cities, including my hometown of Dallas, Texas, being brought to almost a complete standstill by cyber attacks, and such that they couldn't open their doors, they couldn't accept water payments, they couldn't accept FOIA requests, which, I'm trying to imagine a world where we don't have to. No, I'm not going to. The fact is that every important function of government can be ground to a halt by a very simple vulnerability. So, Ron, if you could kind of talk about what you feel is necessary to do to address these issues going forward.
Yes, sir. Alderman, thank you for your time. Cybersecurity is an issue, and the maintenance of it is an issue, because I don't want to become, I'm trying hard to make sure the city does not become one of these things that's reported in the newspaper. The first one you'll see there, and you can look this up online in Google or what have you, is I'm referencing March 2023 article that Oakland, California was victim of cybersecurity. The article goes on to say that ransomware attack against Oakland that has affected city services and exposed reams of sensitive personal data and nightmare. It also goes on to say that the city was effectively crippled because of it, and that it took a very long time to get it back online. What does that really mean? That means that if that were us, things like the water plant would stop. That's health and safety for hundreds of thousands of people. Another one is Dallas, Texas. Dallas, Texas, unfortunately, suffered in, this report's from June, and they lost their dispatch center, and it was shut down for a while. That was very, very bad. The fire and rescue services couldn't respond properly without radio and trying to do workarounds. And then there's one here closer to us, that's Racine. They got, unfortunately, attacked also, and these are very, very critical and unfortunate things. So the budget of $2.8 million for fiscal year 2024 is necessary to keep us, well, improve our cyber infrastructure, network infrastructure, so that we can continue to maintain our cybersecurity defense posture. We have things that we need to continue to fix. It costs just about $1.4 million a year just to maintain equipment that's not end of life. End of life is a term used in my industry, the IT industry, to say, okay, you've got a PC. A PC is got Microsoft operating system on it. It's a Microsoft platform. At one point in time, that Microsoft platform is no longer supported by Microsoft. That means they don't give any security updates for it anymore. That means I have to get rid of it. I have to replace it with something that does. If I don't, I can't go to an insurance company and say, we need cyber insurance in case, because there's always an in case. So this is a program that has to happen in order to maintain what a risk manager pointed out was maintaining security stopgap insurance, called cyber insurance. And the $9.3 million, I believe, over the course of 5 years, is the estimated cost to maintain that defense. That entails a lot of training for our people, not just equipment, and equipment replacement during that period of time. Any questions?
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
I have a question. One question.
Hang
Ron.
on.
If our system was breached, do we have a plan?
If our system is breached, we do have a plan. It's called the Business Contingency or Recovery Plan. It's in my office. It has just been redrafted, actually from 2013, which I'm proud of. Yes, we do.
So I have one question, one question. All right, so you just mentioned our water plant would shut down. Why?
Potentially.
Potentially. So why isn't it in a closed circuit?
It is.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't mean it's perfect. There's always somebody out there that I'm afraid is gonna figure something out.
Because that's something that would be federally and everything protected, wouldn't it? Because it's the water, and it goes towards hundreds of thousands of people.
Yes, I'm very concerned with it, I promise you. Yes. And we try to make sure that those things are controlled as best we can.
Thank you.
And Ron, the business continuation plan, is it written, it's printed out?
We just got done reviewing it, and you're going to be seeing that again.
But it's in a binder?
It's right now in a binder. Yeah.
It doesn't require you to turn on a computer to read it?
No, it does not. It's
Good.
a paper. It's actually old school paper. It's got lists of phone numbers and people so that you don't need to turn any PC on to read it. Yes, it's not in the cloud. Gotta have that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. So now we're continuing on talking about repairing what we currently have, repairing our neglected infrastructure in the city of Waukegan. And we have to address the issue of deferred maintenance. As I like to say, and I think Engineer Jesus has said today, if you don't fix it today, you're going to pay double tomorrow. So it behooves the city to continually maintain its current infrastructure so that you don't have something catastrophic happen like a water main break. I think we all remember back 20 years ago, the city of Chicago was essentially underwater when its main water main broke and wreaked havoc all over the city's loop. That was from years and years of neglect of the water mains, and we don't want to see something like that happen in the city of Waukegan. And as Jesus mentioned earlier, he is coordinating road replacement with utility upgrades. You want to avoid cutting the asphalt twice. You don't want to have to rip the roads up twice. We want to spend the money once, make sure it's done right, and address all the issues along that road or corridor once you're looking at touching that infrastructure. And we need to provide public safety with modern facilities and support systems. You know, as Director Ron just mentioned, cybersecurity is one thing, maintaining our digital footprint and continuing to progress with newer and advanced technology and safety services is something that every municipality is looking toward. We want to decrease response times. You want to increase the ability to reach more people at once. And so looking at how the tools in the toolbox for public safety to be able to do that all costs money. So current annual road resurfacing projects. The city currently spends $7.5 million a year just on annual road resurfacing. The city's also exploring and has looked at a new central police headquarters, which would be approximately $60 million, and that's in today's money. That's not 5 years from now if the city were to actually start planning and start breaking ground. New fire station, $12 million. Stormwater and sanitary sewer upgrades, water main replacement, as we talked about. Regular facilities maintenance, how are we maintaining the current buildings that the city has? What are we doing to make sure that the city is on a plan to regularly repair roofs, tuck pointing, you know, all the things you do, HVAC systems, all the things you do to prevent general malfunction and to address normal wear and tear. So Chief Navarro, I see you sitting back there. Do you want to come and talk about what a new central police headquarters would look like, or why the city would be exploring that? I think you could talk about the current facilities and what they look like and whether
Yes, so our current facility wasn't designed to be a police station. So originally, I believe it was a fire department, and then when the new city hall was built, we took the old city hall and started to convert it into a police department, so it doesn't work well. I'm not sure of those that are here today, if you've come to the police department to file a police report and walking into our facility and what you're met with. Unfortunately, there's a great need for a lot of construction to happen there in order to bring it up to today's standards. Our jail, we're still meeting the old standards that was set by law. So any changes that we make in that, any upgrades we make in that, it would cost us millions of dollars probably to bring it up to today's code and standards. Our facility, we have 163 officers currently in the department, and the needs that we have for the facility, unfortunately, aren't being met with the personnel that we have. We also have civilian staff that work in that same facility. When you walk in the building, I don't know if any of the aldermen here ever haven't taken a tour and you would like one, so you could have a first-hand observation on how our building unfortunately is falling apart for the most part, whether you're going through the bathrooms, whether you're going into a hallway. The facilities that our officers have, in the locker rooms for the males, for the females, where we keep our IT equipment is kept in the basement, and the condition of that entire area is just the entire building needs needs a serious update, but I don't think it would be cost-effective to do that. I think it'd be a lot more cost-effective to put up a new facility based on the needs that building has. I don't know if you have any questions based on what I just described, but anytime you'd like to come and take a tour, I'd love to give you a tour so you can, again, have firsthand knowledge on the facility.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Would you expect that a new police station would be built in, this one would be torn down and would be constructed in the same place, or would it be built at a different location?
There's, we'd be open any possibilities, but maybe more could be more conducive where it's at now. We could use part of what we have. We could use part of the jail, knocking a portion of the building down, keeping the jail that we have, and then building, create the new building going towards the north, towards the south of the parking lot where we currently have the statue there on the south end of the building. There have been different ideas that have been proposed, but I'm just open to the most cost-effective plan.
I can add to that. There are consultants that look specifically at where police headquarters and police stations should be given response times, how efficiently their vehicles can get in and out of that area based on traffic and based on population. So that's something else that would probably be looked at and to see whether or not it's best placed where it is, or there's a better place in the city of Waukegan to put the police station.
Two things. First of all, with tearing it down and replacing it, the big problem I see is where do you work out of in the meantime, right?
So so it would be only a portion of the building. It's just one example that's been talked about in the past. It would be just one portion of the building. Remember, that building is two put together, so it's City Hall and the police department. So you could technically probably take down a portion of it, and we could operate on the other half. Or maybe we operate out of this building for a portion of the time. There are several options that we've
Use
had.
the alderman's offices, perhaps, which we don't have. So the other thing is, in my opinion, and I'm not a police officer, so correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't a police station make more sense being more centrally located as opposed to all the way downtown?
And that a study would, just like or the Attorney Kelly said, that's a study would give us those indications, because we can put in calls of service and where the majority of where our site would be most beneficial for the city.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Have we started looking, instead of doing it here, because I've been through that police station, it's like stuck in the 50s or 40s, whatever. Look at other buildings that we could purchase and renovate that and go from the 60 million down to maybe 20 or.
So no, I've not been a part, we have not started that, I've not been a part of it yet.
Because there's a lot of vacant, huge companies that have left Waukegan or around that we could just purchase the building and then renovate, and then you guys don't have to leave anywhere. And when that's in construction, then move right in.
And there's always possibilities, there's things that have to be met on our end, but engineering maybe would need to get involved to see how feasible building may be for us based on the needs that we have. There's always that possibility.
So yeah, because even the parking's too small here.
Yeah. So there's a couple things here that we have looked at other buildings so far. There's not as many large buildings as you think there are that are available. But one of the things that we have looked at here, and we don't even know if we can do it yet, is doing underground parking, doing a parking garage here and going out the back. And part of that reason is that our vehicles are sitting out in a parking lot and they should be more secured. So whether that be here or another building, and then you would have to see what the cost of renovations would be. So we have not ruled in or ruled out anything. It's just, that's approximately your number. Now, that could be higher, that could be lower. The other thing is that this building cannot really service the technology that the police need by today's standards. This isn't ever going to happen.
Not even the parking, because I see them over here all the time, and then all these city parking. I would just rather them just go somewhere else.
parking. We don't own the entire parking lot. We share it with the church.
Exactly.
One of the biggest things that is taking up space in police departments right now is actually the server rooms that are required for body camera footage. And so the...
Well, not just that, training, I mean, shooting ranges, I mean, you got something where they can exercise, and, I mean, you got...
Yeah, no, I was just talking about like a new, kind of a new demand is the technology that takes up for server rooms. All those other things that you think of traditionally, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why I don't see it feasible here.
Yeah, I'm open to, you know, whatever we can work out. Believe me, it's needed.
But I totally agree. I think it is needed very, very badly. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief. All right, Chief Pazer, come on down. We're looking at renovation, reconstruction of fire station number 3, projected cost $12 million. And so Chief Pazer, why don't you tell us about the needs of the fire department and what's going on with station number 3.
Very good. Thank you for allowing me to speak. You see a picture up top here of our fire station 3, which was built in 1952. The average fire station nowadays they build to last for 70 years. When this station was built in 1952, it was definitely not built to last 70 years, I can assure you that. Anybody that's been into it will understand exactly what I'm speaking of. It's a very, very small station. Most people drive by it, don't even realize that it is a fire station because it is so small. I got hired 26 years ago, and from the day I was hired, we were talking about building a new fire station 3, and has not been done yet, so it's still the same station. And unfortunately, because of that, because there's been so much talk over the years of building a new fire station, it's been neglected because we've always said, we're not going to put any money into it because we're going to build a new one. And again, here we are 26 plus years later, and we still have the exact same station with the same carpet and other stuff in it that has never been fixed or replaced. So it's very tired. It's definitely in need of being rebuilt. A main part of it is we've outgrown it. It's too small. We house 5 people in the station. It's a very dangerous station because when our vehicles are backing into the station, we used to get out, stop traffic for people on Lewis Avenue. It's too dangerous to do that now because people will go around our vehicles. Even with the lights on, they still go around us. Our personnel have been almost hit many, many times. So now they don't even get out of the rig until they're back up and on to the apron to back into the station. Very tight quarters. The engine with the mirrors on it barely fit coming out. There are no facilities for female employees in the station, which is obviously a big deal and needs to be fixed. So lots of things that are dilapidated and in need of repairs. Like Chief Navarro said, there's a technology. We don't have room for technology in there. So it is truly like taking a step back in time, going into the station. One of the sides of the station, the back corner, the concrete is sinking on it. So we have water that leaks into the station often. So please stop by if you would like, take a peek. We love our fire stations. We love to take care of them, and we already have plans. We've already spoken with an architect. We have some property that we've talked about building a new station. Station 3 is, by call volume, is our busiest station out of all 5 of our fire stations. So it has the smallest district, but it runs the most calls because it's centrally located. So it covers our Station 1 and Station 4, which are 2 very, very busy districts. So it's in the right spot. We had a study done that said it should be a little farther up on Grand Avenue. However, our call volume proves that it's in a fantastic spot. So our thought is to tear it down and rebuild right where it's at. That's what we're thinking about doing right now, again, because it is in such a great location. We are a little landlocked, but we have some ideas on how to fix that as well. So, questions, comments, concerns? Sir?
$12 million, wow.
Sir?
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
What are you guys planning to do there?
We're hoping to put 3 apparatus bays into it. living quarters. The
Is
way
it
they're
gonna
doing.
fit there? I mean,
Say-
I pass by Lewis Avenue all the time. It doesn't seem that large to fit all that.
The piece of property?
I said it doesn't seem to fit all of that, what you're trying to suggest that's gonna fit it there.
Well, again, without getting into details, because nothing's been finalized yet, we do have some plans to make the footprint a little bit bigger.
Okay.
So again, nothing I can speak of at this moment.
And
But-
isn't that the only firehouse active that you actually have the pole that goes down?
It's actually Station 4 up on Jackson and Gulf.
Okay.
Yes.
Then
And-
we can move forward. I was like,
Yes.
no, you can't leave that cool thing.
So we hope to make our new station single story because of cost, because it's a lot cheaper. Once you go to a second story, then because of ADA requirements, we'd have to put an elevator and 2 sets of stairs in it, which obviously is then going to increase the price. And that's the same way if you put a basement in as well. So, and they don't usually put poles in fire stations anymore because they're liabilities now. So Bob will increase our rates, so we won't be able to do that. So, please.
So same question I had for Chief Navarro. If you're gonna tear that down and rebuild it, what are you gonna do in the meantime?
So we will move the crews to Station 1, and we'll run an east and a west crew. So this would be a west crew, so the ambulance and engine would obviously face west out of Station 1. We have enough room there. And then Station 1 crews would obviously face east. So Station 1 is very, very busy also. Station 3 does a lot of backup calls in District 1, so it'll be very beneficial to have them there anyway.
Right,
So-
but what about the calls, say, west of Grand, I mean, like the west side of?
It'll take them a little bit longer to get there while they're doing the rebuild. So, I mean, we have stations surrounding it. So, I mean, depending on where the call is, like say if it's at Grand and Green Bay, Station 5 can get there quick. Station 1 is the backup station there anyway. Station 2 is available, so everything is surrounded. And unfortunately, it's the cost of doing business for a little while until we can get something new built. So we have, like the mayor mentioned, we have looked at a couple other sites in that district. One was incredibly expensive and a little farther west than we wanted it. And so we're still peeking at a couple other spots right now. Nothing's definitive yet. Sure. Anybody else? Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chief. All right, speaking of continued neglected infrastructure that needs repair, Engineer Jesus is going to come back, talk about the pedestrian bridge over Sheridan Road.
Hello again. So this is the pedestrian bridge over Sheridan Road. It is in need of repair. It does not meet current ADA standards. One thought that came to fruition was removing the entire bridge completely. However, this bridge does lead to one of the major parks in the city, and it is utilized by our residents. So expecting our residents to go out their way and take the light at Greenwood and Sheridan Road, I foresee that is not happening. So it is important for us, prudent to the city, to ensure that we have accessibility to the park, meeting ADA standards, ensuring safe access over one of the most traveled roads in the city. This project has been submitted for a grant, so there is that time lapse that I talked about earlier. We have to have phase 1 engineering, phase 2. If the money's available to start those processes now, it's important for the city to ensure that all the documents are ready, so when there is funding available from the federal government, that we can take advantage and get ranked high to ensure construction of the bridge.
Thanks, Jesus.
Can I ask one quick question? So is this 2.5 million the total cost of the project or just the engineering?
The 2.5, that's construction.
Okay, thank you.
Question, have you guys done a count of how many people actually pass this bridge, or is it even worth the 2.5 million, or just put a stoplight there, and it'd be cheaper?
So I do not have those numbers. We can easily go out there and count, particularly in the summer, so we will have to wait till maybe next year, but we can do it.
Yeah, because I mean,
it's the evaluation, again, so IDOT, because this is an IDOT right of way, and it is a 4-lane road, and it is, the ADT on it is very high, that in order to provide a stoplight here will require approval from IDOT, and they're not keen on providing traffic signals near adjacent to the traffic signal. We also need, if we go that route to bring it to grade, now we have to have a median treatment that meets either requirement. We may not have the right of way, so it'll start to increase the scope of work when an easy solution that we know it works, it's build a new bridge. And with funding available that we foresee, that is a possible item within the next 2 to 5 years.
Let's try to get some numbers, how many people actually walk over that bridge, because, I mean, how about if only 200 people walk over that bridge? Why am I gonna spend $2.5 million on 200, you know?
But keep in mind, Alderman, people are afraid to walk the bridge right now. So those numbers may not be accurate because of the disrepair that it's in.
And what if one resident gets killed running across the street? How much is that worth?
Well, that's why I'm suggesting maybe a stoplight or something.
But he just said a stoplight's probably not feasible. If there's
Well,
another stoplight a block away.
There's always a probably on everything. That doesn't mean IDOT's not gonna say, okay.
And Jesus, with regard to the grants that you were speaking of, is this something that, would there be something that the city would have to pay toward the grant, or would this be like 100% funded by the state or the federal?
There's never a fully funded grant. The only exception to that are the STP projects where we rely on the toll credits. If toll credits are available, we always request them because of the designation as an environmental justice community. So to answer your question, no, it's always 80-20. That is a conservative assumption with any grant.
80-20, the city's 80 or the city's 20?
The city is 20.
So I have a question. So
Yes.
in your cost of 2.5 million, if we decide, does that include if we make the decision to remove the bridge as well?
Yes, it includes demolition and construction. It does not include the engineering because we submitted that for the grant. However, the cost allocated for construction, we're able to fund that with different means. So this is strictly for construction services.
And then, Jesus, let's talk about the culvert rehabilitation and why that's important.
Correct. So right now we have in part of the 5-year CIP program, we are currently, our designers are assisting us to develop the engineering drawings for these 3 culverts, which is the North Jackson Street culvert, the County Street culvert, and the Sheridan Road culvert. I have many photos that show the disrepair that it is in. We are working from a document provided by our consultant back from 2019. So the longer we wait, the longer the infrastructure degrades, and the more it'll cost in the future. Some of these culverts do require a full replacement. The ones you see here are just a rehabilitation. We're in a position where we can include engineering items to bring it up to where it needs to, without having to do a full replacement. That's what's going on right now at the Glen Rock culvert. That culvert was in such disrepair that we could not rehab it. We had to fully replace it. So it's important for us to have a proper maintenance plan in the city. Even if we don't go out there every year, every 2-3 years, it's important for us to know the condition of our system, and that leads to an adequate asset management program for all items in the city.
We talked about water lines, but we didn't talk about the sanitary system lines and the upgrades there.
Yes, so all these projects have been in the books for a while. Chris and I talked about these projects with his field crews as well. So we feel that these are the some of the most important projects for our sanitary upgrades. We don't treat our own water, but we do maintain the lines. So we do have 14 lift stations, and we have a lot of items that, a lot of sewer lines that are very old, so some are clay. All those need to start being replaced. Otherwise, we'll start to see more sewer backups, which leads to residential damages or business damages, and increase the quality of life in the city.
I got a question on that. Okay, so if the Blackwater all goes to Lake County Sanitary District, why ain't they the ones maintaining this for this Blackwater? Why are we?
Because the lines are in the city. So
okay, I understand that, but they charge to treat those lines, right?
Yeah. So
do they give us a portion back of the money that?
No, we all pay our treatment bill from the North Shore Water Reclamation City in the city. That's to treat the water at the plant. There's a plant by North Shore Water Reclamation District here by the lake, and there's one by Gurnee. We are responsible for the water lines, and that is imposed by the county. That it's standard for all municipalities that we maintain our lines, and in addition, the residents have to pay to treat the water.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
All right, Jesus, I touched on this earlier, but we're looking at a cost of $8 million for water main replacements due to repeated breaks.
That is correct.
This disaster that we don't want to have happen when we have water main break.
Yep.
It's emergency contracting. If you don't plan for it now, it costs double the price later.
Exactly. And working with Antonio and his crews, we have a heat map that we developed where it shows the most recurring water main breaks. Going back to Kelly's first statement, making sure that utilities are taken care of before we resurface the road. We have developed a plan that also quantifies the lead surface land removal in conjunction with the IEPA project plan. So we're able to do a two-phase approach, meaning we'll replace the water main and also take care of the lead service lines while subsequently coming and do the surface transportation upgrades.
And then finally, bridge rehabilitations and replacements. I do know that the state of Illinois does rate all of these types of bridges, all bridges used for roadways, and once your bridge gets to a certain rating, they will take that bridge out of commission. We heard about that one bridge in Joliet that the cars were passing over at their own peril. At one point, there were signs up. So talk about what the city has to look at in terms of design and rehabilitation, and what we're looking at in costs.
Yep. So we do have 7 bridges in the city that we're responsible for. 3 of them right now are either in the newer state. There is your Maitland Drive, your Grand Avenue Bridge, and your Washington Street Bridge. The ones that are now in need of repair are the Greenwood Bridge, the Market Street Bridge, Liability Bridge, and Genesee Bridge. All of these bridges have been, we have started the efforts to pursue the state-funded bridge program, which will give us an 80-20 match going back to those grants. So for each of these bridges, the one you see in the top left, that will be the Greenwood Bridge. We recently received approval from IDOT to start phase 2 engineering. Belvedere Street Bridge, that one will start construction early 2024. Genesee Bridge, we're looking at about a 3-year gap. And Market Street Bridge, we're looking at about 4 years to start construction. So again, going back to the initial statement of having your phase 1 documents ready, when we go through any level, it's state or federal, they will review those documents. And if there's any errors or omissions in it, they will come back to us, and that will just delay the project. So it's important for us to also seek adequate engineering firms that are well equipped to handle the paperwork that IDOT imposes on a municipality.
Question?
Yes.
The $26 million up there that's identified as the cost, is that our 20% or is that the full construction cost?
That is the full.
Okay.
Yes.
And have we already started the application process for the grants?
Yes.
For those bridges?
Yep. Once again, Greenwood Bridge, we're in phase 2 now. Okay. That grant is available. So is Belvedere Street Bridge. That one, it's towards construction, towards the end of phase 2. And these are all grant funded. These get submitted to IDOT Bureau of Local Roads and Bridges. They review our estimates. They give us a proposal for the next 5 years. So it's important for us to also start a lot of these phases before 2025. That's when IDOT will close the Surface Transportation Bridge Fund that is available to municipalities now. So it goes back to having the planning, ensuring that all these documents are well developed so we don't see any strains along the road.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Jesus. We're going to talk about the last bucket. Stu, do you want to kick us off on community triage and treatment?
Yeah, this is the one that has a few slides associated with it, but it probably has just as much as importance as any of the other buckets. There's a recognition in this process that no matter how much you invest in the future, no matter how many potholes you fix, no matter how much planning you do, if the quality of life in the city is not tolerable for the businesses and residents that are here, if people do not feel safe, if people do not feel cared for, then you're not going to have much of a city left. And there are going to be immediate needs that need to be taken care of. The city has to look at its core competencies in this and realize that it is not a social services organization, but it can support social services organization. It is not a treatment facility for persons suffering with whether it be homelessness or addiction or trauma, but it can support organizations that do those things well, and that there are things that need to be done. And so these aspects are much harder to quantify. I think if you could put a slide up for a price tag on stopping a shooting or preventing one overdose, we would have those slides. And maybe there are partners who can actually try and quantify those things. So you're not going to see slides beyond this, but when you're thinking about how to allocate the pot of money that we've discussed, this is something that staff feels and staff recognizes is something that does need to be recognized. And probably a lot of good ideas from this will come not only from you, but also from your constituents. So with that, we'll kind of move on to kind of the process of what's next.
Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Stu. No, go ahead.
We've thrown a ton of stuff at you today. You know, we started with trying to kind of define how much there was with the 130 million, and then you got a lot of concrete proposals from staff divided into these buckets. But once again, the final decider, the decision maker here is going to be you as a council. And what we ask is that you consider these things, you begin discussing them, and that you begin reflecting what your priorities are, work in subsequent committees of the whole or in whatever form you feel is best to come to a consensus and take this out to your ward meetings. It doesn't have to be this presentation. This is a lot to ask people to absorb. But take some form of this to your constituents, get their feedback, and then come back. And I think that Kelly can talk a little bit about her experience when she worked. The model for this is kind of one that she's worked with before in Evanston with their ARPA plan.
Yeah, so City of Evanston received $43 million in ARPA funds, and there was an immediate question of how do we prioritize the spending? What do we do with these funds? How do we impact the community, impact economic development? Same issues that Waukegan's facing. It's the same issues that every municipality faces. And one of the ways we really attacked the plan was to look at, one, who are our community partners? Who are our non-for-profit partners in the community, and what do they do, and what do they do best that the city doesn't do well? And how could we best partner with them and utilize their services and support them in a way that reaches the community and start calling them partner agencies? So that's one of the things that I would implore the council to start looking at. Who are the social service agencies, who are the non-for-profit agencies in the community that the city can partner with to best utilize those services and support? I think it's imperative that the city conducts listening sessions with the community, all different wards, all different communities, and really get some boots on the ground feedback from the residents as to what they're experiencing in their community and where they see the most need for the budget and these funds to be spent. I think once you receive that feedback, it will really help you to prioritize where the greatest need is in the city, aside from those emergency issues that we've talked about earlier. But where can we best assist and reach the public as a whole that makes sense? And I think you really have to not just go to those listening sessions or have those listening sessions in your ward or however you're going to do them, but you have to find a way to incorporate back the feedback from the community. And I think it's got to be a diverse network. It cannot be just, one particular type of group. You need to reach everybody because everybody has a voice. And importantly, how do you then take all of that feedback, look at where the budget is, and prioritize? And that's really where the guiding principles are that Stu outlined earlier in the presentation. How will that feedback and that plan guide you in your decisions when you're making, when you're voting up at the dais for certain matters? And when you're looking at the budget, what's going to guide the budget? We can see that, $130 million of new income coming in sounds like a lot over the next 10 years, but we also saw how dire straits the city will be in just about 3 years. So how do we split the pot up, reach, acquire the most benefit for not only needs that need to be addressed now, but also our community as a whole? As Stu suggested, there are social issues in the city of Waukegan that should be addressed, and how can this new funding do that as well? I think our plan is we want you to go out into the community, want you to get that feedback. We want to help you do that, and we want to have an adoption of a plan by the end of this year. I think that's going to be really critical for this council to adopt a plan, and then to use that plan going forward to help you guide your decisions when you sit up here as legislatures.
So I have a question. What's the projected timeline to make this decision?
Well, we're looking at adoption of a plan by the end of the year.
Yeah. So just kind of taking it step by step, this is the first committee of the whole where this has been presented publicly. I think that we would like to hear feedback from you, possibly have you schedule another committee of the whole where you bring that back, scheduling ward meetings in the fall of 2023, this fall. And then before the end of the year, have a plan that you agree on. So when the city staff begins budgeting in January, that they're taking that into account.
So I typically have a ward meeting in September-ish. So are you asking each individual alderman to do that? Or are we going to try to do town halls where the whole city is involved? Or
Right now, we don't have any town halls scheduled because we don't have someone like we did before to organize that. So at this point, I'm going to say, talk to your individual wards.
Okay. So you had made it, I don't want to say a rule, but we weren't allowed to have any staff at our ward meetings. Is that still the case?
I don't know that staff needs to be there because you have all the information that you need. We can talk about what specific things that you want to discuss, but
well, I won't know till I get there because it's going to be feedback from my residents. So
yeah, I mean, what I would do is I would make sure that these handouts are available to the residents who come to your ward meetings in particular, so that they, people need that visual of being able to see that and digest that. You can also put that out on your Facebook pages and let them digest it that way, so that they kind of have some time to review that and see, what they think. Some will watch this, others will not. But whatever way you find in your individual wards to communicate that is the way we want you to do that. For some people, they never see social media. They don't care. Other people want to have a handout for them. Whatever, you let us know what you want, and we will make sure that you have that.
So in the beginning, the plan creation and adoption process, you had organize spending priorities and timelines, attain city council attention, then present plan to public. That's not really the order it's going to go in, right?
Well,
like you're not expecting us to have a consensus before we even start to get public feedback.
Right.
Okay, so these are in the wrong order. Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, initially we thought we would have a little more feedback from aldermen after we went over things, but let's give you guys time to do ward meetings and kind of get your impact from what the wards come back as. And then we will probably have another committee of the whole in November, and then be prepared to make decisions in December.
And Mayor, if I may, although we can't do this whole presentation in every single ward, after you look at this, if you have suggestions on how you would either like us to condense or summarize or edit this, we can do a different version of, we can prepare a different version of these materials that may be better to communicate to your neighbors and your constituents. We can even talk about possibly getting it translated. I think that would probably be an important step.
Also, it is available on the website because it is recorded, but please remember, those of you who are using Comcast, some, it's channel 17, some for 18, that is being phased out, I believe last weekend. Latest will be, you might get a rerun this weekend, but you won't have that as an option for this meeting coming forward. And again, that is not a city decision, that is a Comcast decision, and it's for all things, it's like county meetings, it's individual municipality meetings. Some of the municipalities don't have YouTube available. We do provide that, so this meeting will be provided that way.
And these are just suggestions, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It's not a closed list. It's it's what staff came back with when they were given this framework of.
Yeah, because I remember something else on there the first time about a dome in public works.
You've already done the salt dome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's
okay.
You
I'm
approved it.
confusing the meetings.
Yeah, you
okay.
approved it a few meetings ago.
The tension is that some of these things are going to be put into the capital improvements project, and really it's a question of do you want to use these funds to move those forward in priority?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, again, questions tonight from audience should be pertaining to what we've talked about tonight, so that the public can see what the questions are. Madam Clerk, do you have people who signed up?
Yes, I do, ma'am.
Okay.
We have 3 people. You'll have 3 minutes. And the first one is Mr. Rayon Edwards.
Good evening. Let me just start off by saying this was horribly put together. You got us sitting here for 2+ hours, and we got to wait to the end of all of this information that you just presented to us to ask a question? Are you serious? What's wrong with y'all? Who put this together? Why didn't we condense this and present this to the community? You hand out these packets, it's not in Spanish. You still don't have an interpreter here to talk to the Latino community, which is a big portion of this city. And you talking about you running this city, is you? Because we're talking about all these great things that you want to go on in the city. Well, let's talk about it then. Because you scared to be in the city. You have an escort you to your car after every meeting. We have 3-4 police officers sitting down here. Baby, we ain't gonna have nothing in the city of Waukegan with all this violence going on. The last dump that y'all put up there, the box, talking about the mental health and the youth and things of that nature. Let me explain something to you. You can go redesign a house 1,000,000 times, but if you don't change the inside of that house, it's gonna be the same house. You understand what I'm saying? So when I talk about the future, we're talking about the kids. If we don't invest in them, who's gonna sit up here? Who? We always put them at the bottom of the list every time. And for most of y'all probably wouldn't care because y'all kids ain't here. The violence, most of y'all wouldn't care because it don't affect y'all. $108 million damn dollars. You know, you got Jane and Motley sitting up there, and they supposed to be doing this. I had an opportunity to go down to Springfield for the governor's inauguration. And you know what I seen? I seen people from the cities down there allocating and asking for money for their cities. I didn't see nobody from Waukegan. They down there every week. That's how they get money to keep their city afloat. What are you doing? You know, you made a lot of promises. I sat at the table with you when we campaigned, and a lot of what you said is bull. You've been wanting to do this. Your first year, you took all that money and you didn't put none in that police pension. You knew what you were doing. We talked about that. It's disgusting. And you thought I worked hard to get you in that seat? Baby, you better get ready. Because if I ain't never worked my ass off, I'm going to work overtime to make sure you don't sit there the next term. That's a promise.
Thank you. Mr. Clyde McLemore.
Yeah. The war on drugs grossly and intentionally target communities of color and violated human rights through incarceration, job loss, housing displacement, and denied access to education because of racist policies. Today, we see ourselves at a crossroad in this country, particularly in Illinois. Legalization of marijuana generates billions of tax dollars in the state. And as the billions-dollar industry grows on, Illinois communities of color are still dealing with the repercussions of mass incarceration. Black and brown people have been targeted and criminalized for the very crimes that make individuals millionaires today. Waukegan has this new money, $103 million, coming in off the backs of the community. This new money should be put back into the community. Our children need a youth center, programs that would enhance their minds. And Taylor, you have picked and choose these different organizations to support, but some of them ain't even been functioning long. These slots are all over the city, which the city gets money from. The city also had a push box and asked people to put their little tickets in it. All that money comes to the city. You can make history, and Waukegan could be the second city in Illinois if you give reparations to families, to the Afro-American settlers of Waukegan. If this council does decide to do reparations, I challenge you to do a 10-year resolution tonight. We should have had on Friday this agenda and the budget and what agencies you plan to put that money in. This new money come in the general funds, and we don't know how much we're talking about, but I did just hear that we got $103 million. But I have to agree with Mr. Edwards because, and you're not. That's all I'm gonna say is you're not. Y'all had this whole thing planned of what you want to put that money in. That money shouldn't go in no police pension and fire pension. I know it's low and everything, but that money should not go up in that. Because you getting it off of poor people from the casino and then the legalized
Thank you, Mr.
marijuana.
McLemore. Thank you. Last speaker, Brendan Stewart.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I've just got a couple of pointed questions regarding the presentation. I understand this is not a, call and response, so I just would be interested in your perspective on these. My alderman apparently wasn't able to make it tonight, so I hope to ask each of you. First, questions regarding the revenue side of the presentation that was made. Council mentioned a scenario where the Potawatomi lawsuit may delay the opening of the permanent casino. And regarding that scenario, if it were to come to pass, do you see a risk that Full House could potentially file a countersuit regarding an associated loss of revenue with the delay? And if that were to happen, do we estimate an erosion of the $108 million? And what might that scenario look like? And is that something even probable? Because that's, you know, I've been involved in litigation before, unfortunately, and that's a scenario that popped into my head. Second, regarding the long-term challenges, is it reasonable to expect that borrowing costs will scale as a factor of market interest rates? And if so, should there be strategic considerations made based on the high rate environment that we're in, right? If we decide to float new bonds, is that going to increase those service obligations significantly, or are those going to scale linear to what we've seen in the past? Also, the expenditure projections that were presented, are those accounting for increases in the consumer price index? And if so, are those increases accounted for in a linear fashion? Like, do we assume 3% rate of inflation per year, or are we expecting the sort of 5 to 7% environment that we've seen? Also, I do want to make a point regarding the last slide that I think was, brought some things to my attention that a number of business owners have been discussing with me and has been a concern in the community that I'd like to bring to the council's attention. There's a clear interplay between the impact of social problems on community development and the impact of community development and the continuation of social problems, especially as we see as a result of poverty, crime, addiction, various mental health issues. We don't see these problems in communities with high economic development, quite frankly. We don't see them in Highland Park. We don't see them in Lake Forest. We don't see them in Lake Bluff to the same degree that we see them in Waukegan. Unfortunately, they also tamp down the potential for economic development here in Waukegan. I've seen a lot of business owners that are concerned about maintaining their presence in the city because of crime, because of risk, because of high cost. I'd like to see some of this money spent in a way that addresses those issues, not just to make a better environment for business, but to make sure that folks in the community have the opportunity to participate, as Mr. McElmore mentioned, in the economic future of the community, right? And we know a lot of members of our community have been marginalized, and I don't want to see gentrification occur out of this money. So I appreciate the time to discuss these concerns, and I would be open to some answers to the first couple of points. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. We have one more, Killian Scaronia. I think I said your name right.
Killian Scaroni, 2041 North Poplar Street. Thank you all for having us here tonight. Just a few points I wanted to make from your presentation here. Number one, I want to talk about the water plant. I do believe that is a huge opportunity we have. We're always talking about ways to bring in more money to our city, and I know we are going to be facing a deficit here coming up in the coming years potentially, and it would be a great way to bring in money selling water to other communities that do not have the access we do to the water from Lake Michigan. And I think it's something we should definitely prioritize in our infrastructure. Another point I want to make is there's a couple mixed-use housing developments been talked about tonight. One at the Sheridan, Washington super block, and another one was down off of Market Street at the South Lakefront. One thing I really do want to emphasize is we need to make sure that there is affordable housing mixed into that. We, unfortunately, and Mr. Stewart did touch on this as well, these go up and we have to be careful not to gentrify and price out everyone in our city. If this happens, it's just crime's going, the homeless population is going to grow even more, crime's going to spike even more. We have to be careful how we implement this. And my third point I want to make is, I can't emphasize this enough, pushing through this plan, we need as much public input as possible for this. It is very disheartening. My alderman as well is not here tonight, and I see 3 total aldermen not here tonight. It is very disheartening to me that they did not have the time or the interest to be here to listen to what the public has to say, and for the not just the near future, but the long-term future of our city. And I encourage everyone here tonight to speak to your constituents, to actually listen and take that feedback and really listen and put that into this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That concludes the public portion.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I will emphasize again, this is not, there's no decisions being made, and there's nothing being voted on for a while. We want to make sure that the public does get the information, and we are trying our best to kind of say, you know, all of this is very circular. You need one for the other, for the next, for the next. again, if we need water, if we want to sell our water, then we need to have some of our infrastructure in place, not just at the water plant, but other infrastructure. So when we talk about pension funding, some of these are state mandates that have been put on municipalities that get voted on in Springfield, and we have to conform to those, but we don't necessarily get the money for those things. Same with lead pipes. All of those things are more and more demands being put on the municipalities. The other part of it is when we talk about taking bonds out, we did improve our credit rating this last year. Another thing that could improve our credit rating is if we funded our pensions better, it would increase our credit score, which in turn makes it easier to borrow money. We've kind of in Waukegan gotten ourselves into a vicious cycle where we don't get the best deals on things because we haven't looked long term. This is an opportunity for all of us up here to make an impact on our community in the future and look at things long term. Because ultimately what the goal is here is to help our community grow, to make people want to move here, to make people want to stay here. And when we increase our economic development, we help everybody across the board. Just like we want diversity in the people that come, we need economic diversity. And that's what we're striving for here. This is putting it out there for the public to know, letting the aldermen know, but there's some work that needs to be done now. Now we got to get into the wards. And you're right, it would be great if all the aldermen were here and on board with this, because it is something that impacts each and every ward. This is an important subject, and I wanted you to know what are the things that we're discussing. You need to know that. And so we will continue to have more discussions down the road. But again, please be in contact with your aldermen and let them know what are the things that you think are important. And think outside the box. That's what we're looking for. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. There will be another meeting on Wednesday that was put on by some of the aldermen. Those items are not going to be voted on that evening because they haven't been set up to be voted on. So all it will be is a discussion. Some of those items will be on Monday's agenda. Some will be at a later date. Some of them need to go through committee. Some of them need to go through planning and zoning. So the aldermen will be here, but nothing will be voted on that evening. And consequently, staff, you do not need to be here because all it is a discussion. So staff, you are not required to be here on Wednesday night. This meeting costs money. Every time we hold a special meeting, you can see we're paying corporate counsel, you're paying a videographer, and I have to give staff extra time to compensate them. So staff, you're free on Wednesday. The rest of the aldermen will be here because it has been a posted meeting. So if you choose to be here, you choose to be here. I want to wish everybody a good evening. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I need a first and a second.
Just want to make sure that we want to say something too, I'm pretty sure. We just don't want to close out the meeting. In terms of tomorrow's
Wednesday's meeting?
Oh, yeah. Wednesday's meeting, you know, I do ask the staff to be there because I think that we're going to have some questions. So I do ask for them to be there.
You can call a department head at any time. The department heads are not called. You also have your staff briefing on Wednesday, or your aldermanic briefing.
Like I said, I do ask and then I'm pretty sure the other aldermen agree as well that we would like the staff to be there. But that was the last. I wasn't planning on saying anything in terms of that, but then you mentioned it. But what I did want to say in terms of the other information that we were talking about, in terms of the non-for-profit organizations, you know, that, you know, we're going to try to help out. You know, I asked them to have everything in place, you know, your organization in place, your plan in place. That way when we meet with you guys, you know, we can have something that we can work towards, because that, you know, that's the point of us meeting, not just to create an organization, but have everything in place. That way we can meet and then see how we can work together and partner together. I also did want to mention that this weekend had some businesses complain regarding the downtown scaffold. I'm going to meet with some downtown business owners on Tuesday, next week Tuesday at 7:30 at my office. And I'll put the information on my website, but it's 814 Washington Street, 7:30. And at 6 o'clock, I'm going to have a neighborhood watch meeting. So everyone's welcome to attend if you guys want.
And I hope you'll allow before that time for the staff to investigate that, because they'll have some more answers by then. We don't make decisions based off of social media. We make them off of what is legally followed, and so we'll have more information on that.
Yeah, but I mean, the point of the meeting is to talk to the business owners because they have a lot of concerns as well.
Right. I had a first by Alderman Newsom. Can I have a second? Alderman Bolton. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.